The air hung thick and heavy, a humid blanket woven from the stench of stagnant water, concrete dust, and something indescribably rotten that clung to the insides of my nostrils. My boots crunched on glass and dried plaster, each step a potential death rattle in the absolute silence that had swallowed Manhattan whole. This wasn't the New York I remembered, the city that thrummed with 1,000,000 lives and 1,000 sounds. This was a mausoleum, a tomb built for the living, choked by the dead. 1 year, one brutal, relentless year after the outbreak, and we were still here, still fighting the zombie swarm of New York. "Clear," Maria whispered, her voice a ghost in the cavernous remains of what had once been a luxury department store. She moved with the silent grace of a predator, her medic pack a heavy promise on her back. Ben, our youngest, fidgeted behind us, his rifle held a little too tight, his eyes darting to every shadow. He was good, but still green, still clung to the notion that we might actually be safe for more than a few minutes. Safety was a mirage in this city. Our mission was simple, or so we thought: resupply. Our secure location, a fortified penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, was running low on medical gauze and a specific antibiotic Maria needed. This store, a decaying husk on Fifth Avenue, was a long shot, but rumors from other dwindling survivor groups whispered of a hidden stash in its sub-basement. A fool's errand, probably, but hope, even the faintest ember, was a dangerous motivator. We moved deeper, flashlights cutting weak paths through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the beams, agitated by our passage, looking like tiny, lost souls in the perpetual twilight. The once pristine marble floors were cracked and stained, display cases shattered, mannequins dismembered and strewn like macabre artwork. Every few steps, a shallow pool of putrid water reflected our distorted figures, a constant reminder of the city's decay. My own heart hammered a rhythm against my ribs, a familiar beat that had become the soundtrack of my life. Fear. It never really went away, just shifted, mutated into different forms. Today, it was the fear of the unknown, the dark corners, the possibility of the silent dead. "Alex, look." Maria's voice was barely audible, but the urgency in it made my blood run cold. She pointed a gloved finger to a rack of designer clothes, still hanging neatly, though faded and torn. A fresh tear in a silk gown, and a faint, almost imperceptible drag mark on the dusty floor. Not a zombie, something else. A human. My grip tightened on the worn handle of my axe, the steel cool and familiar in my hand. Firearms were a luxury we couldn't always afford. Loud, they drew too much attention from the ever-present zombie swarm. A sharp axe was quiet, efficient, and up close, where the fight always was in New York. "Ben, secure the rear," I murmured, my eyes scanning the surrounding devastation. Every shadow now seemed to harbor a lurking threat. "Maria, stay behind me, close." We followed the drag mark, a faint trail that led past display cases filled with forgotten jewels, past a cosmetics counter where lipstick tubes lay scattered like fallen soldiers. The air here was slightly different, a faint metallic tang mixing with the rot. Blood. Recent. The trail led to a service stairwell, concrete steps descending into deeper darkness. The silence down here was absolute, heavier than above, a silence that pressed against my eardrums until I could hear the faint ringing within them. The sound of my own breath seemed deafening. "This is bad," Ben whispered, his voice cracking. "What if it's them, the scavengers from the Bowery?" The Bowery Boys, a brutal gang known for their ruthlessness and their penchant for taking more than just supplies. They were almost as bad as the zombie swarm, maybe worse, because they were still human. They understood malice. "Stay focused," I snapped, my voice harsher than intended. "Eyes and ears, Ben." We descended, each step echoing into the void. My memories flickered, fragments of a past life. I remembered taking these escalators, not stairs, with Sarah, my wife, maybe a year and a half before. laughing, buying her some ridiculous expensive scarf for her birthday. That world was gone, devoured by the outbreak. Now every breath I took was a silent apology to her ghost, a promise to keep fighting, to survive, even when it felt like survival was a curse. At the bottom of the stairwell, a heavy fire door. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of deeper blackness visible. And from within, a faint groan. Not the shuffling, mindless moan of the zombie swarm. This was different, human, pained. "There's someone in there," Narration whispered, her hand already reaching for her medical bag. Her compassion was a beacon in this desolate world, a constant source of friction and inspiration. "Could be a trap," I cautioned, my hand still on the axe. My instincts, honed by a year of New York's brutality, screamed caution. "Could be someone who needs help," she countered, her gaze unwavering. "Alex, we don't just leave people." She was right, or at least she was trying to be right, trying to preserve the scraps of our humanity. But humanity in this city could kill you faster than any zombie. What would you do? Risk your life and the lives of your team for a faint chance at saving a stranger? I nodded slowly, pushing past the doubt. "Ben, cover us. Watch that stairwell. Maria, you stay ready. Move slow." I nudged the door open with my boot. The smell hit me first, a sickening cocktail of blood, sweat, and something metallic, like stale pennies. The room beyond was a storage area, shelves packed with old inventory, all covered in a thick layer of dust. In the center, a man lay huddled against a stack of discarded mannequins, bleeding heavily from a wound in his side. His breath hitched, ragged and shallow. He was barely alive. He looked up as we entered, his eyes wide with fear, then relief. "Help," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Please." Maria was by his side in an instant, her fingers already tearing at his blood-soaked shirt. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm, professional. The medic in her always took over. "Bowery boys," he coughed, spitting a fleck of blood onto the floor. "Ambush, took everything, left me for dead." He was young, maybe Ben's age, with a wiry frame and the haunted eyes of a 1,000-yard stare. His breath was coming in short, painful gasps. Maria's face, usually so impassive when tending to wounds, tightened. The wound was deep, a nasty stab wound that had probably nicked an organ. He was going into shock. "He needs a transfusion," Maria said, looking up at me, her face pale. "And proper surgery. We can stabilize him, but he won't last long here. He's lost too much blood." The implications hit me like a physical blow. We were on a resupply run, already low on time and resources. Taking on an injured stranger, particularly one with such a severe wound, was a death sentence for all of us. But leaving him felt like a betrayal of everything Maria stood for and everything I secretly still hoped we were. "We can't," Ben blurted out, his voice sharp with fear. "Alex, we can't take him. He'll slow us down. He'll die anyway." "He's right," I said, my voice hollow. The words tasted like ash. "Maria, we have to be pragmatic." Her eyes blazed. "Pragmatic? Alex, he's a human being. We have supplies. We can try." "Trying can kill us all," I argued, gesturing to the fire door. "The Bowery boys know he's here. They could come back. Or worse, the fight he put up could have drawn the zombie swarm. Every minute we spend here is a gamble." The decision hung heavy in the air, a pendulum swinging between compassion and survival. What kind of world did we want to live in, if we lived at all? A world where we left the wounded to die, or one where we died trying to save them? This was the eternal question that haunted all survivors in New York, 1 year after the outbreak. The injured man whimpered, a low, pathetic sound. "Please," he rasped again, his eyes locking onto mine, pleading. And then, above us, a crash, a heavy, resounding thud that echoed through the building, vibrating through the concrete floor beneath our feet. It sounded like something big, something heavy had fallen, or been thrown. The air outside the fire door suddenly seemed to hum with a low, growing rumble. Not a single groan, a multitude. The distinct, terrifying sound of the zombie swarm waking up. "Too late for pragmatic," Ben hissed, pointing his rifle at the door. "They're here." My heart leapt into my throat. The crash had done it, drawn them in. The very thing I had feared. We were trapped in a sub-basement with a dying man and an injured Maria, and the growing sounds outside promised that the zombie swarm of New York was about to come calling. "Maria, stop the bleeding," I commanded, my mind racing, already processing escape routes, impossible odds. "Ben, secure this door. Move anything you can in front of it." The man looked up at me again, his eyes pleading, but also with a flicker of understanding. He knew his fate. Maria, however, continued to work, frantically pressing gauze to his wound. Her face was set, determined. She wouldn't give up. Ben shoved a stack of old display racks in front of the door, then a rolling cart laden with boxes. The rumble outside intensified, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the floor. The first impacts against the metal door began. Not hard, not yet, just testing, pushing. "They're coming from the main floor," Ben said, his voice tight. "Must have come in through the blown-out windows. The crash probably drew them from blocks." Blocks, that meant hundreds, thousands. The zombie swarm was a living, breathing entity, a dark tide of hunger that ebbed and flowed through the city's arteries, always seeking warmth, seeking life. This was exactly why we avoided ground level in Midtown. "We need to find another way out," I said, my eyes scanning the room. Storage shelves, old boxes, dusty mannequins, no windows, no other doors. "Maria, how long before you're done with him?" 5 minutes, maybe," she replied, her brows furrowed in concentration. "But he still needs a hospital. This is a temporary patch." 5 minutes. 5 minutes was an eternity when the zombie swarm was at your door. The impacts against the fire door grew harder, more rhythmic, a groan of tortured metal, a splintering sound. The barricade wouldn't hold long. "Alex, look," Ben pointed to a far corner. Hidden behind towering stacks of old retail packaging was a smaller door, a heavy, industrial-grade steel door with a red fire escape sign above it, faded and peeling. "Maintenance, Connell?" My urban planner brain kicked in. This department store was connected to others, maybe even to the subway system. A network of hidden tunnels, forgotten by the living, but perhaps still traversable. It was a long shot, a desperate hope in a city that offered none. "Maria, we're moving him," I said. She looked up, startled, then nodded, understanding. "Ben, help me," I instructed, already moving toward the man. We gently, carefully lifted him. He cried out, a sharp gasp of pain, but then bit his lip, refusing to make another sound. Maria supported his head, speaking soothing words to him. The fire door behind us buckled inwards, hinges straining with a terrible shriek of metal. A sliver of decayed flesh, a grasping hand, pushed through the widening gap. The moaning intensified, a chorus of hunger dead. "Hurry!" Ben yelled, already at the steel door, trying the handle. It was rusted shut. Damn it! I pulled out a pry bar from my pack, a heavy steel tool I always carried. I jammed it into the gap between the door and the frame, putting my full weight into it. The metal shrieked in protest, then groaned, slowly giving way. Rust flaked off, dust puffed out. My muscles burned, my breath came in ragged gasps. The injured man's weight was a dead weight in our arms, slowing us down, making every step a monumental effort. Maria, despite her own injury, was strong, supporting his head and torso. Another impact against the fire door. This time, the barricade gave way. Display racks toppled, boxes scattered. 3 of them stumbled through, their decayed bodies lurching into the room. Their eyes, milky and dead, fixed on us. "Go, Ben," I roared, pushing the pry bar harder. The steel door groaned again, then with a sudden pop, the lock mechanism gave way. It swung inward with a shriek of rusted hinges, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel beyond. "Maria, get him in," I yelled, pushing her and the man through the opening. Ben covered their retreat, firing 2 quick, precise shots from his rifle, taking down the 2 closest zombies. The third stumbled, drawing the attention of the others who were pushing through the main fire door. I grabbed the pry bar, using it to slam the steel door shut, then spun to face the remaining zombies. There were 5 of them now, moving past Ben, their focus solely on us. "Go, Alex," Ben shouted, his voice strained. He fired another shot, dropping 1 more. I shoved the pry bar through the door handle, wedging it against the frame, a flimsy, desperate barricade. The thud of their bodies against the door started immediately. "Run!" I yelled, turning and bolting into the dark tunnel, Ben right behind me. The tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare, a tight concrete tube, barely wide enough for 2 people abreast. The air was colder here, damp, smelling of earth and raw sewage. Maria and Ben moved ahead, struggling with the injured man, their flashlights bouncing erratically. "What is this place?" Ben gasped, his voice echoing. "Service tunnel," I replied, my own breath coming in ragged gasps. "Connects to the subway system, probably for freight or maintenance. It's our only way out of this part of the zombie swarm." The thudding against the steel door faded behind us, but the sounds of the tunnel ahead were new. Dripping water, the skittering of unseen things, and a faint, almost imperceptible groan, growing louder with every step. "Lights off," I hissed. We plunged into absolute darkness, relying on the faint, ambient glow of what little light seeped in from the rear of the tunnel. It was a risky move, but flashlights would only reveal our presence. The moaning ahead grew louder, a low, constant murmur that seemed to come from the very walls. The air grew heavier, colder, the distinct, putrid smell of the zombie swarm. We had bought ourselves precious minutes from the group behind us, only to run headlong into another one. New York City, 1 year after the outbreak, was a labyrinth of death, and we were just rats in its maze. "Maria, put him down," I whispered, my hand reaching for my axe. "Ben, load a suppressor." The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a collapsed section of a subway platform. Debris was everywhere, twisted steel, broken concrete, rusted rails. And among the rubble, hundreds of them. A dormant part of the zombie swarm, waiting in the perpetual darkness, drawn by the faint sounds of our desperate flight. They swayed gently in the darkness, their movements almost imperceptible, until one of them, a gaunt figure in a tattered business suit, turned its head, its milky eyes catching the faintest sliver of light from behind us. It let out a low growl, a sound that quickly spread through the horde. "Quiet," I breathed. "Slow, backward, we move backward." The injured man, bless his heart, remained silent, his eyes wide, fixed on the growing awareness of the zombie swarm ahead. Maria helped him lean against a tunnel wall, positioning herself between him and the slow-moving tide of the undead. But Ben, young and prone to panic, stumbled. His boots scraped loudly against a piece of loose rebar. The sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. Heads snapped towards us, dozens, then hundreds. The growls intensified, a low, terrifying chorus that filled the cavern. The zombie swarm was awake, and we were its only prey. "Run," I roared, pushing Maria and the injured man forward. Ben, cursing, followed. We bolted back into the narrow tunnel, the sound of the zombie swarm now a deafening roar behind us, their heavy, shuffling footsteps echoing the frantic beating of my own heart. The tunnel was long, impossibly long, and our lead was shrinking with every painful stride. The injured man was a heavy burden, but we couldn't abandon him, not yet. "They're faster than I thought," Ben gasped, glancing over his shoulder. The first ones were already gaining on us, their decayed faces illuminated by the faint, diffused light from the department store door we had just sealed. The air grew thin, our lungs burned. My arms ached from the weight of the man, my legs screamed in protest. We were out of options. The steel door was locked, and the zombie swarm was bearing down on us. Then I remembered the subway system. A year after the outbreak, it was still a vast, complex network. There had to be a way to use it to our advantage. My mind, trained to see patterns, to analyze structures, raced. "Right, next junction, right," I shouted, hoping my voice carried over the growing cacophony of the swarm. "There's an old maintenance shaft, leads to the express line." "Are you sure?" Maria asked, her voice strained. "The maps are decades old." "It's our only shot," I grunted, pulling the injured man along. The tunnel opened into a larger junction, a cross-section of 3 different lines. To the right, a dark, unexplored passage, barely a crawl space. To the left, a track line, and the horrifying sight of more dormant zombies, stirred awake by the noise. "Left's a death trap," Ben yelled, pointing. "Go right," I confirmed, pushing Maria and the man into the narrow opening. Ben squeezed in after them, turning to fire a few suppressant shots as I dove in last, slamming my axe handle into a crumbling section of concrete, bringing down a shower of dust and debris, momentarily blocking the path of the closest zombies. The crawl space was even more suffocating. My shoulders scraped against the rough concrete, dust and ancient grime coating my skin. The injured man was forced to crawl, groaning in pain, but he moved, spurred by the primal urge to survive. Maria, ever the caregiver, whispered encouragement to him. We wormed our way through the dark, the sounds of the zombie swarm fading into a dull thrum behind us, replaced by the grating of our clothes against the rock, the rasp of our breathing. This was New York's underbelly, a forgotten world, now a refuge. "How much further?" Ben wheezed, his flashlight beam illuminating a wall of crumbling concrete ahead. "Should open into a utility shaft," I replied, hoping I remembered correctly. The city's blueprints, once my bread and butter, were now my only guide through this nightmare. Then we drop. Drop. The word hung in the air. We were relying on old information, a forgotten escape route from a world that no longer existed. What if it was sealed? What if it led to a worse danger? But what choice did we have? We were already deep beneath the zombie swarm of New York. Maria reached the wall first. She pushed, kicked, then pounded on it. "It's solid, Alex," she cried out, her voice tinged with despair. "It's a dead end!" My blood ran cold. A dead end? After all that, we were trapped in a dark, claustrophobic tunnel, with the zombie swarm slowly but surely making its way through the debris behind us. This was it. This was how it ended. The thought was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. Then Ben, always tinkering, always looking for a solution, noticed something. A subtle seam in the concrete, almost imperceptible. He ran his hand along it, then felt along the floor. "Alex, there's a pressure plate, or a switch. Something's here." Hope, that dangerous ember, flared again. I pushed past Maria, my fingers tracing the outline Ben had found. It was a small, rusted lever, almost flush with the floor, covered in decades of grime. "Hold on," I grunted, prying at it with my fingers, then with the tip of my knife. It was stiff, fused with rust. "Damn it, come on!" The sounds from behind us grew louder again, the heavy thud of bodies against the makeshift barricade of debris. They were getting through. We had seconds. "Let me," Ben said, pushing me aside. He pulled out a small multi-tool, jamming the pliers onto the lever. He twisted, grunting with effort. The lever shrieked, then with a sudden snap, gave way. A section of the concrete wall ground inward, then slid upward with a terrible groan of machinery, revealing a dark, vertical shaft. A ladder, old and rusted, led down into absolute blackness. And from below, a faint, almost musical hum. The express line. "Go!" I yelled, pushing them forward. Maria, with surprising strength, helped the injured man onto the ladder. Ben followed, then me. We descended into the pitch black, the sounds of the zombie swarm receding above us, replaced by the rhythmic clanking of our boots on the rusted ladder rungs. The shaft was narrow, smelling of ozone and metal. This was the beating heart of New York, a year after the outbreak, a pulse that still echoed even in its death throes. "Watch your step," I called out, my voice hoarse. My hands were raw, muscles screaming, but the adrenaline was pumping, keeping me going. We were still alive, for now. We dropped what felt like an impossible distance, perhaps 6 stories, into a wide, dark tunnel. This was an express line. The tracks lay silent, covered in fine dust. No trains, just the ghost of a world that once was. "Which way?" Maria asked, her voice tight with exhaustion. "South," I said, pointing down the tracks, "towards Fulton Street. Our secure location is a few blocks from there. We cut through the financial district, used the elevated walkways." The financial district, once the bustling hub of global commerce, was now another monument to the fallen, a canyon of steel and glass, silently reflecting the dead sky. A dangerous route, but it was the fastest. As we started to move, the injured man, who we now knew was named Leo, collapsed. Maria rushed to him, her medical bag already open. "He's fading fast, Alex. His pulse is weak. We need to get him somewhere safe, fast." His eyes fluttered open, looking at me. Don't waste your time," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Leave me. You won't make it. Not with me." His words hit me harder than any zombie attack. He was asking for us to abandon him, to be pragmatist. What kind of person leaves a dying man to save themselves? But what kind of fool gets himself killed for a lost cause? This was the terrible calculus of survival in New York. "No," Maria said fiercely, pushing a bandage against his side. "We don't leave anyone, not while there's breath in their body." Her unwavering resolve, her stubborn kindness, was both a burden and a blessing. It made our survival harder, but it also made it worth something. Suddenly, from the darkness ahead, a sound. A rhythmic, metallic clanking. Not the shuffling of the zombie swarm. Something else. Something mechanical. My hand flew to my axe. Ben raised his rifle, eyes wide. Maria tensed, shielding Leo with her body. The sound grew louder, closer. A single, powerful beam of light cut through the gloom, momentarily blinding us. Then, from the darkness, a rail car. A modified subway car, armored and reinforced, rolling slowly but steadily down the tracks towards us. And on its flatbed, behind a heavy-mounted machine gun, a grizzled old man. His face was a road map of scars, his eyes sharp and suspicious. He raised a hand, stopping the rail car 100 feet from us. "Well, well," the old man drawled, his voice rough like grinding gears. "Look what the tunnel's dragged in. Fresh meat for the rats or lost lambs for the slaughter." Old Man Silas, a legend whispered among the few survivor groups. A former NYPD officer who supposedly holed up in the tunnels, driving his custom rail car, preying on whatever stray survivors or supplies he could find. He was notorious, he was dangerous, and he was our only hope of getting Leo out of here alive. "We need help," Maria called out, her voice clear and strong. "He's injured, badly." Silas narrowed his eyes, his gaze flicking from Maria to Leo, then to me and Ben. He took in our worn gear, our weary faces, the axes and the rifle. "Help costs," he said, his voice flat. "Always does. What's it worth to you?" Another dilemma. What did we have left to give? What was the price of a life in a city where life was cheap? The zombie swarm was a constant, pressing threat, but Silas, with his cold, calculating eyes, felt almost as dangerous. "Information," I said, stepping forward, my axe held loosely at my side, a silent threat, a silent promise. "We know about the stash in the Fifth Avenue department store, a sub-basement full of medical supplies." Silas's eyes gleamed, a predatory glint. "Medical supplies, eh? That's a tasty bit. What's the catch?" "The zombie swarm is all over the main floor," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Thousands of them. And the Bowery boys were there too. We barely got out alive." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Always a catch. All right, tell me the details. And in return, I'll take your injured friend to my infirmary. If he lives, he works for me. If he dies, well, at least you tried." This was Silas's offer, a cold, hard bargain. If Leo survived, he was no longer ours. He belonged to Silas, to his underground network, to his ruthless way of life. But it was Leo's only chance. And us? I asked, looking from Silas to Ben and Maria. What do we get? A ride, if I'm feeling generous, he replied, gesturing vaguely with his hand. Or a quick way out of the tunnels if you're lucky. I don't run a charity, boy. This is New York, 1 year after the outbreak. Every man for himself. Maria looked at me, her eyes pleading. Leo's breathing was shallow, his face ashing. He was fading. We had no choice. Deal, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. But if you lay a hand on him or on us, you'll regret it. Silas just smiled, a thin, humorless smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Brave words for a tourist in my city. Get in. Tell me your story. Let's see if your information is worth the trouble. We helped Leo onto the rail car, laying him gently on a makeshift cot. Maria immediately began working on him again, her movements quick and efficient. Ben climbed in, rifle still at the ready, his eyes never leaving Silas. I was the last to board, my axe still gripped tight. Silas engaged a lever, and the rail car lurched forward, slowly picking up speed, rumbling down the dark tracks, deeper into the forgotten heart of New York. The metallic clanking, the rhythmic hum of the machinery filled the tunnel. We were safe from the zombie swarm, for now, but we were in the hands of a man who might be even more dangerous than the undead. So, Silas said, turning in his seat, his gaze fixed on me. Tell me about this stash, every detail, and don't leave anything out. I don't like surprises. I began to tell him, describing the store, the layout, the approximate location of the sub-basement, the number of zombies we'd encountered, the presence of the Bowery boys. Every word felt like a betrayal, a trade of one danger for another, but Leo's life depended on it. As I spoke, the rail car moved through the darkness, occasionally passing a collapsed section or a flooded tunnel. The sheer scale of the ruins, even underground, was staggering. So, Silas said, turning in his seat, his gaze fixed on me. Tell me about this stash. Every detail, and don't leave anything out. I don't like surprises. I began to tell him, describing the store, the layout, the approximate location of the sub-basement, the number of zombies we'd encountered, the presence of the Bowery boys. Every word felt like a betrayal, a trade of one danger for another, but Leo's life depended on it. As I spoke, the rail car moved through the darkness, occasionally passing a collapsed section or a flooded tunnel. The sheer scale of the ruins, even underground, was staggering. So, Silas said, turning in his seat, his gaze fixed on me. Tell me about this stash, every detail, and don't leave anything out. I don't like surprises. A year after the outbreak, New York was still a beast, a living, breathing monument to death and decay. And we were just trying to survive its depths. What would you have done? Traded critical intelligence for a slim chance at saving a dying man, knowing you might be sending another group of survivors to their doom? I still didn't know if I'd made the right choice. But in this city, right and wrong were luxuries we could no longer afford. The rail car continued its journey, the rhythmic clanking a grim lullaby in the darkness. Maria worked tirelessly on Leo, her face grim. Ben watched Silas with an intensity that promised violence if the old man made a wrong move. And I just watched the darkness ahead, wondering what new horrors this unforgiving city had in store for us. Silas was a man of his word, surprisingly. Or perhaps he simply valued the promise of medical supplies more than the lives of a few strangers. After I had relayed every detail I could remember about the department store, he didn't try to betray us. Instead, he simply gestured to Maria. Heard enough. Get to work, medic. If that boy dies, your information better be damn good. The rail car pulled into a hidden alcove, a makeshift station carved out of the rock. It was dim, lit by a few flickering gas lamps, and filled with the low murmur of voices. Other survivors. Silas's people. They emerged from the shadows, gaunt figures dressed in patched clothes, their faces wary, their eyes sharp. They carried an assortment of weapons, old shotguns, rusted pipes, sharpened rebar. A small, self-contained community living in the forgotten arteries of New York. They took Leo, gently but efficiently, whisking him away into a deeper tunnel. Maria went with them, her medical bag clutched tight. She shot me a look, a silent promise to protect him, a silent plea to hold up our end of the bargain. Ben and I were left alone, surrounded by Silas's people, their gazes like probing fingers. "Rest," Silas commanded, gesturing to a cleared area with a few old crates for seats. "You look like you wrestled a zombie swarm and lost." We sat, our bodies protesting every movement. The air here was cool, dry, a welcome change from the oppressive humidity of the surface. But the tension was palpable. Every click of a weapon, every whispered conversation set my teeth on edge. This wasn't safety. This was a temporary truce. "So, the department store," Silas said, leaning against his rail car, polishing a wicked-looking blade. "Thousands, you say? And the Bowery boys? Sounds like a party." "They're a problem," I confirmed, my voice weary. "Ruthless. And they'll be watching that place. They know we were there." "Good," Silas grunted. "Let them soften it up." Gives us an opening. His logic was brutal, efficient, and utterly devoid of compassion, just like New York. We spent the next few hours in a tense standoff. Ben eventually drifted off to sleep, rifle still clutched in his hands. I couldn't. My mind raced, replaying every detail of our escape, every zombie encounter, every decision. The city above, with its endless zombie swarm, felt 1,000,000 miles away, yet still pressed down on us, a tangible weight. Maria returned just before dawn, her face streaked with grime and exhaustion, but her eyes held a spark of triumph. "He'll live," she whispered, collapsing beside me. "Lost a lot of blood, but I stitched him up. He's strong. He'll make it." Relief washed over me, a powerful wave that almost brought me to my knees. We hadn't abandoned him. We had traded for his life, and he was still breathing. It meant something. In this world, a single life saved was a victory. "Now what?" Ben asked, stirring awake. Silas, who had been watching us with an unnerving intensity, finally spoke. "Now we get to work. The sun's coming up. Time to see if your intel is worth the risk. You two are coming with me. Your medic stays here. Her skills are too valuable to risk on the surface." "No," Maria said, pushing herself up. "I go with them." "No, you don't," Silas replied, his voice flat, final. "You're injured. You're useful here. The surface is a different beast. You stay." His decision stung, but he was right. Maria had taken a bad fall. Her leg was bruised and swollen. She'd be a liability in a direct confrontation with the zombie swarm. "I'll be fine," she insisted, looking at me. "Alex, I can help." "Stay here, Maria," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "He needs you here. We'll be back." Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. She understood. This was the way of things now. Hard choices, every single step. Silas's people prepared the rail car, loading it with supplies, extra weapons, and grappling hooks. They were a motley crew, a dozen hardened survivors, each with a grim determination etched on their faces. They were used to fighting the zombie swarm, used to the brutal realities of New York. We ascended to the surface just as the first slivers of dawn painted the jagged skyline of Midtown in hues of orange and gray. The air was cold, crisp, and still. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant, almost imperceptible moaning of the zombie swarm. The railcar emerged from a hidden grate, pulling into a deserted alleyway just a few blocks from the department store. The streets were choked with abandoned cars, their rusted hulks serving as silent monuments to the chaos that had erupted a year ago. Dust and debris lay thick on everything, giving the entire cityscape a ghostly, abandoned feel.
"There it is," Silas murmured, pointing to the department store's shattered facade. It looked like a gaping wound in the side of the street, its display windows blown out, revealing the darkness within. "No movement," Ben whispered, scanning the street with a pair of binoculars. "Too quiet." Too quiet. That was always the most dangerous sound in New York. The zombie swarm was rarely truly silent. This meant either they were completely gone, which was impossible, or something had drawn them elsewhere. Or it was a trap. "The Bowery boys," I said, my voice low. "They know we were here. They're waiting." Silas nodded, his eyes glinting. "Smart. They want to draw us out. Let's not make it easy for them." He turned to his men. "2 teams. Team Alpha takes the rooftops. Team Beta secures the alley. We'll go in from the service entrance. Alex, Ben, you're with me." We moved with practiced stealth, each of us a ghost in the dawn light. The rooftops were a perilous path, scaling crumbling fire escapes, leaping across chasms between buildings, the wind whipping at our clothes. From above, I could see the true scale of the zombie swarm. A river of dead flowed slowly down Fifth Avenue, a seemingly endless tide of shuffling bodies, their moans a low, constant hum that vibrated through the very fabric of the city. We were just a small island in an ocean of death. "They're moving east," Ben observed, his voice strained. "Something's drawing them." "Probably military," Silas grunted. "Still trying to bomb the city into submission. Useless, just pushes them around." His cynicism was jarring, but true. Every attempt by the military to contain the outbreak a year ago had only spread it further, creating new hordes, new zombie swarms. New York was a testament to that failure. We reached the roof of the department store. Below us, the main floor was a disaster zone, shattered glass, toppled displays. A few scattered zombies wandered aimlessly, but the massive horde I had seen from the skyscraper was gone, just as Ben had said. "They cleared it out," I whispered. "The Bowery boys. They wanted the medical supplies for themselves." Silas nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. "Good. Less competition for us." We descended into the building through a service hatch, dropping into a darkened storage area on the second floor. The air was thick with dust and the familiar smell of decay. Silence again. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed in on all sides. "Split up," Silas commanded. "Alex, Ben, you check the main floor. I'll take the sub-basement. Report anything you find. And if you see the Bowery boys, don't engage. Come back to me." His orders were clear. He wanted the intel first, not a fight.
His caution, despite his ruthlessness, was a testament to his survival instincts. Ben and I moved through the second floor, our flashlights cutting through the gloom. Designer clothes hung limply on racks, luxury goods lay scattered. The irony wasn't lost on me. All this wealth, all this opulence, reduced to junk by the zombie swarm. We reached the grand escalator, now a silent, broken monument, leading down to the main floor. Peering over the railing, I saw it. The main floor was indeed mostly clear. A few stray zombies, wandering slowly, but nothing like the hordes we'd faced. "Let's go," I whispered to Ben, leading the way down the static escalator. Every step creaked, amplified in the silence. As we reached the main floor, my eyes scanned the vast space. The place was wrecked, clearly scavenged. Empty display cases, torn fabrics, overturned furniture. They had been thorough. "Anything?" Ben asked, his voice low. "Looks like they cleaned out most of it," I replied, a growing unease settling in my stomach. Too easy, too quiet. Then I saw it, a faint glint of light from behind a shattered cosmetics counter. Something metallic, not a piece of debris, something deliberately placed. "Ben, stay sharp," I whispered, gesturing towards the counter. Movement. We moved slowly, carefully towards the counter. As we got closer, I saw it was a discarded energy bar wrapper, fresh, and beside it, a half-eaten sandwich. Someone was here. Someone had been here very recently. "They're not gone," Ben breathed, raising his rifle. They're still here. My heart hammered. This was it, the ambush. The Bowery boys, a year after the outbreak, were still masters of deception and brutality. Suddenly, from the shadows of a fallen mannequin display, a figure emerged. Not one of them, a human. Tall, lean, with a scarred face and a cruel grin. He held a machete, its blade glinting ominously. Behind him, two more figures emerged, armed with crude spears and rusty pipes. "Well, well," the first man sneered, his voice raspy. "Look what the cat dragged in. Silas's little pets. Come to pick up our scraps, have you?" My blood ran cold. This was the leader, Reaper. Rumors of his cruelty were legendary, even among the hardened survivors of New York. "We don't want any trouble," I said, my hand instinctively tightening on my axe. Reaper just laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the empty store. "Trouble? Boy, you're standing in my living room, and you just broke in. That sounds like trouble to me." He gestured with his machete. "Drop your weapons, now, or we'll add your pretty little heads to our collection." Ben tensed, his finger hovering over the trigger. We were outnumbered, outflanked, 3 of them against us. But they weren't the real problem. The real problem was what their presence and any potential firefight would draw. The zombie swarm. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to buy time, trying to think. "Everything," Reaper said, his grin widening. "Your gear, your intel, and your lives. Especially your lives. Silas has been a thorn in my side for too long, and you just delivered his eyes and ears right to my doorstep." This was a trap. They knew we were coming. They were waiting. My words to Silas, my trade for Leo's life, had inadvertently led us into this. "Ben, fire on my command," I whispered, my eyes darting around the spacious main floor, looking for any avenue of escape. Reaper must have read my intentions. "Don't even think about it, boy," he snarled, taking a step forward. "One wrong move, and we carve you up like Thanksgiving turkeys." He was closing the distance. My axe felt heavy, but also ready. This was it. The brutal, inevitable confrontation. The kind that always seemed to find us in New York, 1 year after the outbreak. Then, from the service entrance we had used, a voice. Silas. "Reaper," he drawled, his voice calm, dangerous, always barging in where you're not wanted. Reaper spun around, his cruel grin faltering for a split second. Silas stood framed in the doorway, his own axe in hand, a silent, menacing figure. Behind him, 2 of his men, armed with crude crossbows, their bolts already notched. The tables had turned. Suddenly, we weren't just 2 against 3. We were part of a larger, more deadly game. "Silas," Reaper spat, his eyes narrowing. "Thought you'd be smarter than this, walking into my trap." "Your trap?" Silas scoffed. "You think you're the only one who knows how to lay bait? My scouts have been tracking your movements for weeks, Reaper. I knew you'd be here. You always go for the easy pickings." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. This was a battle of wills, a showdown between 2 of New York's most ruthless survivors. Ben and I were caught in the middle. "Let's not make this messy," Silas said, his voice deceptively soft. "Too many bangs, and you'll have the entire zombie swarm of Manhattan knocking on your door, or what's left of it." Reaper hesitated, his eyes flicking between Silas, his armed men, and then back to us. He knew the threat. He knew the risk. The zombie swarm was a constant, unpredictable force. A prolonged fight would draw them in. "What do you want?" Reaper finally said, his voice tight with grudging respect. "The medical supplies," Silas replied, his gaze unwavering. "And you, and your men, gone, out of this sector. You scavenge west, we scavenge east. No more stepping on my toes." Reaper's face contorted in a sneer. "And if I say no?" Then we make enough noise to bring every last one of those shambling bastards down on your heads, Silas said, his voice chillingly calm. And you'll be feeding the zombie swarm by noon. The bluff was effective. Reaper knew Silas was capable of it. He knew the risk was too great. The medical supplies were valuable, but not worth being overrun by the zombie swarm. He held Silas's gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Then finally, grudgingly, he nodded. Fine, but if I catch you on my side of the Bowery, you're dead. And if I catch you on mine, Silas countered, you'll wish you were. Reaper gestured to his men, and they slowly, reluctantly backed away, disappearing into the shadows. The tension in the store began to dissipate, leaving a lingering chill in the air. See? Silas said, turning to us, a thin smile on his face. Sometimes the biggest guns aren't the ones that make the loudest noise. They're the ones that know when to be silent. He then led us down to the sub-basement. My memory had served us well. The hidden stash was there, a treasure trove of medical supplies, antibiotics, painkillers, and surgical tools. It was more than we had hoped for, enough to last us for months, enough to save many lives. We spent the next few hours loading the supplies onto the rail car, working quickly and efficiently. The air above, the constant threat of the zombie swarm, pressed down on us, a silent reminder that our time was limited. As we worked, I thought about the encounter with Reaper, the thin line between human and monster, the brutal choices that defined survival in New York 1 year after the outbreak. What would I have done if Silas hadn't shown up? Would I have fought? Would I have sacrificed Ben to save myself? The questions haunted me, a persistent echo in the back of my mind. By the time we were finished, the sun was high in the sky. The moaning of the zombie swarm seemed to have intensified, a low, guttural hum that permeated the very foundations of the city. They're converging, Silas said, looking at a small, battered compass. Heavy movement towards the old financial district. Must be another bomb run. My heart sank. The financial district. That was our route back. Our secure location, our home, was in that direction. We need to get back, I said, my voice urgent. Maria, Leo, they're waiting. Silas nodded, a rare flicker of concern in his eyes. All right, but we take the long way, through the lower tunnels. This part of New York is about to get very ugly. We descended back into the rail car, the supplies secured. The clanking of the wheels on the tracks was a comforting sound, a rhythmic pulse in the darkness. We were heading back into the labyrinth, back into the heart of the dead city, but this time with a greater purpose. We had secured the supplies, we had saved Leo, we had survived another day in the zombie swarm of New York. The journey through the lower tunnels was long and arduous. Silas navigated the rail car with expert precision, weaving through collapsed sections, flooded passages, and dark, forgotten chambers. The deeper we went, the more ancient the tunnels became, smelling of damp earth and forgotten history. At one point, Silas brought the rail car to a sudden halt. "Listen," he hissed. We fell silent, straining our ears. From the darkness ahead, a faint, rhythmic thudding. Not the shambling of the zombie swarm, something heavier, more deliberate. "What is it?" Ben whispered, his rifle raised. Silas grabbed a powerful spotlight, directing its beam down the tracks. In the harsh glare, we saw it. A massive, barricaded section of the tunnel. And beyond it, figures. Humans, dressed in patched military-style gear, armed. "Government," Silas grunted, a look of grim resignation on his face. "Or what's left of it. They patrol the deeper tunnels now, trying to control access to what's left of the city's infrastructure." "Are they friendly?" Ben asked, a note of desperation in his voice. Silas snorted. "Friendly? Boy, there ain't no friendly left in New York, not 1 year after the outbreak. There's only survival and control." He was right. We had encountered these remnants of the military before.
They were ruthless, paranoid, and shoot first, ask questions later types. They saw all independent survivors as threats, potential carriers, or looters. "What do we do?" I asked, my hand on my axe. "We wait," Silas replied, cutting the engine of the railcar, plunging us into near silence. "They'll pass. They always do. They're just sweeping, looking for trouble." We waited in the cold, dark tunnel, the rhythmic thudding growing louder, closer. The air crackled with tension. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat. I thought of Maria, of Leo, of the supplies we carried. All of it could be lost in a single careless moment. What was it about New York that bred such relentless, distrustful people? Was it the scale of the zombie swarm, the constant threat that stripped away all pretense of civilization? Or was it something inherent in the concrete canyons themselves, a reflection of the city's unforgiving nature? The thudding stopped. A voice, amplified by the tunnel, echoed down to us. "Clear. Sector 5 is secure. No hostiles detected." Silas let out a slow breath he didn't realize he was holding. "All right, we're clear. Get ready to move." He started the rail car, and we slowly, cautiously moved forward, passing the heavily fortified barricade.
The passage was clear. The military patrol had moved on. We had dodged another bullet. "That was too close," Ben whispered, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "Close is a way of life in New York," Silas grunted. "You learn to live with it, or you die." The rail car continued its journey, taking us deeper, then eventually upwards. The tunnels began to change, becoming cleaner, more familiar. We were approaching our sector, our home. We emerged from a hidden grate in an abandoned park shed, just blocks from our secure location. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The zombie swarm was still out there, its distant moaning a constant, chilling reminder. But for now, we were safe. Silas unloaded the medical supplies, his men stacking them neatly beside the shed. He didn't try to shortchange us, didn't try to take extra. A man of his word, in his own brutal way. "Leo will be in my infirmary for a few days," Silas said, looking at me. "Then he's yours. He's a good kid, strong. He'll make a decent scout if he listens." "Thank you, Silas," I said, a genuine gratitude in my voice. Despite everything, he had saved Leo's life. He had upheld his end of the bargain. He just nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his head. "Don't get soft, Alex. This city doesn't forgive softness, not 1 year after the outbreak." With that, he and his men boarded the rail car, disappearing back into the depths of the tunnel, leaving us standing alone in the fading light. "Let's go home," Ben said, a genuine smile on his face, the first one I'd seen all day. We grabbed a portion of the medical supplies, enough to get us by, and headed towards our secure location. The streets were quiet, deserted, the air still, a rare moment of peace in the heart of the zombie swarm. We reached our building, a fortified penthouse, its windows boarded up, its entrance a reinforced steel door. I knocked on the secret signal, 3 quick, 2 slow. The door opened a moment later, revealing Maria, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "You're back," she exclaimed, pulling us in, her eyes scanning us for injuries. "Are you all right? What happened? Where's Leo?" We told her everything, about the Bowery boys, about Reaper, about Silas and his bargain, about the vast zombie swarm that still plagued New York. She listened, her face grim, but a spark of relief was in her eyes when I told her Leo would live. "The supplies," she said, looking at the boxes we carried. "This is incredible, Alex. We're set for months." Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging New York into darkness, I stood on our fortified balcony, looking out at the ruined cityscape. The Empire State Building, once a symbol of human ingenuity, now stood like a skeletal finger pointing to a dead sky. The Chrysler Building, its iconic crown, reflected the eerie glow of distant fires. 1 year. 1 year since the world ended. 1 year since the outbreak consumed New York. And we were still here, still fighting, still surviving. Maria joined me, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You did good today, Alex. You saved us. You saved Leo. You fought for something." I looked at her, at Ben, who was already asleep on a makeshift cot, exhausted but alive. "Is it enough, Maria? What's the point of fighting the zombie swarm if we become monsters ourselves? If we have to make these impossible choices, trade lives, abandon hope?" She looked out at the city, her gaze distant. "The point, Alex, is that we still ask those questions, that we still struggle with them. That means we're still human. That means there's still something worth fighting for." Her words resonated, a small, quiet truth in the vast, echoing silence of the dead city. We had survived another day in New York. We had stared into the maw of the zombie swarm and walked away. But the fight was far from over. It was just another chapter in our unending struggle. A distant explosion, a dull thud that vibrated through the concrete, shook me from my thoughts. Military, still bombing, still fighting a losing battle. It meant the zombie swarm was still moving, still raging. "We need to plan for tomorrow," I said, turning from the railing. Silas's intelligence on the military movements could be critical, and we need to figure out how to retrieve Leo. Maria nodded. "One day at a time, Alex. One breath at a time." I looked out at the dark, desolate city one last time. The millions of dead below, the scattered few alive, desperately clinging to fragments of hope and humanity. This was New York, 1 year after the outbreak. A city of ghosts and monsters, both living and dead. And as I turned to face the night, a faint glint caught my eye. High atop the spire of a distant skyscraper, a single, flickering light. Not a star, not a fire, a signal, another survivor, another group, a new question, a new dilemma, a new hope, or a new threat. The city had whispered another secret, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that our fight against the zombie swarm of New York was far from over. It was just waiting for the dawn.